Hi, my name's Peter Kerr, and I have in the co-captain's chair Reed Little. And today I want to have a bit of a chat about David Bowie, Never Let Me Down. So how are you going, Reed? How's things in America?
Things are great here. We just celebrated Thanksgiving, so everyone's fat and happy. How are things in Australia?
Oh, it's bucketing down rain in Sydney. So it's 16 degrees. Summer's just around the corner, but gee whiz, you wouldn't know it. So it's just bucketing down.
For those of us that are uh, Celsius challenged, any idea what that would be in Fahrenheit?
Not off the top of my head. You put me on the spot.
All right, I'll Google it later.
No
But it's
worries.
cold.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Reed and myself, we're part of the Contrarians Patreons. And recently there was a David Bowie episode just naming your favorite albums. I wasn't part of that, but it was um, a great discussion. And I think one of the comments that you put, Reed, was segued into Never Let Me Down. And that sort of prompted my interest. I thought, oh, what a perfect contrarian sort of episode, because that's one of my favorites. And out of any of the Bowie 80 albums, I always tap into that album continually. So I guess what we could do is I'll just start and a little bit of background. We all know who David Bowie is. Um, I always think the Never Let Me Down album is part of a cycle, and it starts with this album here, which is the big one, Let's Dance. So that was his big album, 15.3 million sales as of now. That includes 8.7 mil album sales and the rest streaming. So Reed, it's just under Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders of Mars, which is
Right.
the number one popular, sort of David Bowie album. So there it is. That had went to number 4 in the US, number 1 with the Let's Dance album. It was all over MTV. There he is on the front cover, putting his jukes up, and he's basically, it's sort of an album intent. Don't want to be a cult sort of rock star. I want to be a commercial MTV star, and that's certainly what happened. So
I had never thought about how combative that album cover is. David Bowie's about the least threatening physical figure you can imagine. I mean, he was about this big around his whole life. So to be shirtless and in boxing gloves on the front of his album is quite a statement.
It's like intent. So, you look at his career, he was sort of on the periphery, a cult hero. To me, when I look at that, it's sort of like, here it is. Jukes up, listen up.
Yeah.
Then we went into Tonight, and I don't know, he's looking slightly alienish, and he looks like he might be in a church, wistfully praying for another, number 1 album or, more sales. This didn't do so well. So the total sales internationally were like 4.1 million. Not as many hits. I think the big hit was Blue Jean and Loving the Alien. Didn't do so well. So Let's Dance went platinum. This went platinum as well. And then we come to this album, 1987, and it's Never Let Me Down. This went gold. And current streams, 2.6 mil. So that's album sales and streams, 2.6 million. And interesting cover. It's like, he's like a ringmaster in a circus. So you get some sort of idea what may be in the album, because it's everything but the kitchen sink. You've got a ring of fire. You've got a ladder into the sky. It's sort of like, he's the ringmaster. It's going to be a lot of things happening in this album. And that's where we are, 1987. Critically maligned. Went gold, only went to number 34 in US. In the UK, it went to number 6. There was a tour that was quite successful, but just, at the time, it just did not do well with the critics, and I don't think the public really bought into it. Didn't have any hits. The only song that's ever been on a David Bowie album, and this is an example, this is one of his later, greatest hits, is Time Will Crawl. So it never had the Let's Dance, which had China Girl, Modern Love, Let's Dance. It didn't have the hits that came out of that album that were on MTV. And it sort of then, Bowie went on with his career. And over time, this album's been forgotten. So Reed Little, tell me, what do you think? What's your opinion of this album?
First, if I could, would you mind holding up that album cover again?
Absolutely.
So let me apply a slightly different interpretation, because I do think that this is a wonderful representation of this album. But to me, this is not a ringmaster. This is a guy who's lost control of his circus and is dying. If you look at this ladder, the rungs are broken. He's clearly falling and reaching for support. And that's how I feel about this album. I did not know that Time Will Crawl was, sorry, Peter, you can put that down again. I didn't know that was the single off of that. And that's a very weird choice of a single. It's a strange song. Something like maybe 87 and Cry or Bang Bang were much hookier songs, much more accessible songs.
Yeah,
and
it was actually I think it was the second single. The first single was Day In, Day Out.
So, but again, one of his less penetrable songs.
Yep.
So perhaps David or whoever makes the decision, it was probably the record company, on what to release. They didn't really know what to do with that album. It's got bones of great songs in it, but I find it sonically overwhelming because he does have that kitchen sink production. I think of it when I was a child in grade school, we went to a TV studio, and I remember being in the studio, and they're showing you, here, you can move this lever and it fades people in and out, and then you can change the sound around. And listening to that album makes me think that the producer let his kid into the studio to twiddle the knobs, right? Because they're like, okay, we're going to do some excessive reverb here, and then we're going to add some echo, and we're going to pitch shift David on this line. Not the next line, mind you, just this one line. And I read the Rolling Stone review. I won't read the whole thing because it's long and pretentious. Also, I think inaccurate in many ways. But the guy does say, and he adds Peter Frampton, and Peter Frampton overplays to a level he would never do on his own records. And I think, yeah, that is really true. And I love Peter Frampton, but he's so in your face. He's so over the top on this album. It's like, maybe you could just dial that back a little bit. And that's kind of my impression of the whole album. And there's so much of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of a little contrarian because I guess that I really bought into the 1987 Never Let Me Down album. I saw the tour. I think when you see if you see the tour, and it's out on video, you sort of understand it's very theatrical. So basically the backdrop had a glass spider, and Bowie would come down from the top on a chair. And then you'd basically have a lot of this street theatre, street dances that were choreographed by Tony Basil of Mickey fame and others. Right. And you had a crack band. You had Carlos Alomar. You had Peter Frampton having the time of their life. And to me, it's very much of its time. 1987 was when you had the Mutt Lange Def Leppard album, The Wall of Sound, Whitesnake 1987, the gated drums, the big, the cannon drums, the big production. And then, the Trevor Horn from UK pop, the Frankie Goes to Hollywood, very symphonic, the multi-tracking, everything, in every single track has to have something, whether it's strings or sax or whatnot. It's got that wall of sound, and I like it, but it's very much of the time. And I guess that a lot of where, if you're looking and doing a reappraisal, you're listening through 2021 years where a lot of things are more stripped back. And there's been a resistance over time to those albums from the 80s where they're, it's overproduced, it's symphonic, but from a critical appraisal, you've got to take it in consideration. That was the sound of that times. So if we're listening in 2021 years, who's to say everything goes in cycles? Who's to say in 10 years' time that, hey, let's go back to that. Let's go back to the Trevor Horn, the wall of sound. It's like the Phil Spector. If Phil Spector was, doing that sort of production, that would what he would be doing. He'd be filling out all the tracks with sound and making it sound big. And I guess
Right.
Bowie, being an artist, and he was a mature age pop singer, and he's going, Let Dance, that was huge. Tonight didn't do so well. Geez, I've got to up the ante, and I've got to do something with it. And the funny thing is, David Bowie has trashed that album. He goes, it was a huge mistake, but he produced it. If the
Which
album was a success, if it went to #1 and it was multi-platinum, I'm sure he wouldn't have trashed it. But because it flopped, it sold okay, but because it didn't get to those Let's Dance levels, would he have trashed it? So on the album, it was produced by David Bowie and David Richards. David Bowie was responsible for the production responsibilities for this, the sound, the sonic. I can't imagine people bossing David Bowie around. So he was in charge. He knew how he wanted the album to sound. And I guess he was just listening to everything in MTV land, everything that was going, popular music with Prince, Madonna, Michael Jackson, all that sort of sonical, template. And he said, that's what I want. That's what I've got to put in. Another thing is that a lot of Bowie people didn't like it is because I guess where you like an artist is where your entry point is.
Sure.
So if you come to David Bowie right from the start, Ziggy Stardust, you obviously have that template. I love the Ziggy Stardust. I love the series, the soul era. I love the Berlin period. But like me, my entry point, like yourself, was in the 80s. And to me, that's sort of also my opinion and my sort of lack of critical resistance to this album is very much my entry point of how I got into the David Bowie catalog. So if I was in that era and lived through the 70s, through that era of the Ziggy Stardust, yes, maybe I would have been up in arms, like, this is heresy, that you're going down this commercial path and you're doing this album that's just full of just a sonic boom and filling everything but the kitchen sink. But I wasn't. And I guess when it comes to it, there's just so much earworm in this album. I played the album a week ago, Reed, and it's in my brain. There is so many of like Time Will Crawl, for example. It's a song that he wrote about Chernobyl, and the lyrics are really dark, but it's just got this melancholy melody. And, when the sax comes in, it's really lilting. It's earworm. I can't get it out of my
Well,
head. And there's
it's
some
it,
other songs on there that are just, from a melodic point of view, there's just so much earworm in there. And I find it's an album that it's a contrast of great optimism, like Never Let Me Down, for example. That was written about his assistants, a personal assistant, and just a really loving ode. And then there's dark stuff on it. Day In, Day Out is about homelessness in the USA and the futility. And then there's 87 and Cry, which was just angry against Thatcherism in Britain. It's a contrast. There's positivity and there's negativity. So you've got this artist that, it's sonically larger than life. It's widescreen. the songs are there, but lyrically, it's pretty intelligent sort of stuff. It's not disposable. New York's in Love. What other songs? There's
New
Time
York's in
Will
Love
Crawl.
would also have made a better single than Time Will Crawl. New York's in Love's a good song.
Yeah, absolutely. Shining Star, Making My Love. I mean, people diss the Mickey Rourke rap in the middle. I like
For
it.
a good reason. Oh, you like it? Okay.
I don't know why. It's like deadpan. So he's doing this deadpan rap, but it sort of fits in with it. So that's his ode. It's sort of like he's doing a little vignettes of about low lifes and drug dealers, but it sort of works out really well. This album's got Too Dizzy. I even like that. I don't know why David Bowie didn't want that in the remix, the revised version. So he said,
Right.
no, take that off. Look, it's not a perfect album. The only song I don't really like, and I think it's a bit pretentious, is Glass Spider. It does this little spoken word at the start, and one unkind critic on the internet said it sounded like Christopher Guest in Spinal Tap doing the little sort of spoken word thing before Stonehenge. So yeah, that was one. Even in the day, I sort of cringed. It was a little bit out of place. What do you like that song? Do you think it's a bit
Bowie as an author, not as a musician, but as somebody who told stories, was not particularly good. So Glass Spider to me is almost exactly the same as the opening of Diamond Dogs, where he talks about the dark future that his album is going to inhabit. Taken on their own, they're a little cringy, but they do establish a mood. Now, as you alluded to, I'll get back to that in a minute. I don't like the original version of Glass Spider. I think there's so much production added to it that it becomes so over the top, it's just silly. But that is all, like you said, that is David. And to me, Never Let Me Down is a man who doesn't know what he wants to do, which we would never have known if they didn't do the revised version where they stripped off everything except for the vocals and the sitar, whatever is doing that sitar, presumably a guitar or synthesizer. And you suddenly hear those songs and you realize, one, they've got very typical David Bowie lyrics. They're fantastic melodies. He's singing his heart out. He sounds amazing, but he didn't trust any of that. He didn't think perhaps that it was commercial enough. I don't know what his thought process was, but he's the man who then decided to layer backup singers, choirs, orchestras, string sections, saxophone players, 2 featured guitar players. He put his own vocals back in the mix. He clearly did not trust those songs. The Glass Spider tour now, Bowie was always very theatrical. And he clearly conceived of this album in a theatrical way. And anybody who's interested, you can find the Glass Spider tour on YouTube. It's well worth watching. It's an amazing spectacle.
Yeah.
But as I said on the Patreon page, tell me if you don't think Bowie was a supporting character in there. He's got backup singers, so many backup singers. He's got this troupe of 3 or 4 people who play street people who are in and out, and one of them beats up David Bowie. And he's got this dancer who he was thinking of marrying at the time, so he's got her on the stage all the time. And Peter Frampton and Carlos Alomar, who, by the way, there was some tension between the 2 of those guys. Alomar, he's good natured about it, but he said he's like, hey, I'm as good a player as Peter Frampton, which in his own way he is. I mean, they're very, very different guitar players, but Carlos Alomar is astoundingly talented.
Absolutely. A great band. They were a great band.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the bass player or drummer. I'm sorry, bass players and drummers, I never remember your names unless it's Kiss or the Beatles.
Or Deep Purple.
or Deep Purple. There are a few I remember, but most of them not. It's all over the map though. And the Glass Spider is a perfect example that, like I said, it's ridiculous to me on the original album. And I understand why people were turned off by that. Plus, it's a spoken word piece, a very weird science fiction spoken word piece about this spider and her children in this post-apocalyptic future, which otherwise has no place on that album. And, where's the water gone and where are they getting their food and mommy left us and what's going on? And you're like, where did that come from? But
Yep.
you take that away and put a much more spare soundtrack over it and make it, like the soundtrack to a film, and suddenly it becomes eerie and affecting. You're like, yeah, that was a better decision.
Yeah.
But he just wasn't in a place where he could do that in 1987.
Absolutely. I'll put a question to you. So in respect to, so we, your view is that it's too much. It's
Yes.
everything but the kitchen sink. But are you hearing that through rock ears? So as I said, in the 80s, I liked a lot of pop music, and that Trevor Horn wall of sound, like Frankie Goes to Hollywood. I'll give you an example. Two Tribes, where it's the symphonic, multi-tracking. Do you think that, if a person comes into that album, not from a rock perspective and, referencing anything from the rock world, but comes in more from a pop world and the wall of sound, do you think that they would be more sort of receptive in regards to that production?
Maybe. I still think the point that you made earlier, that David Bowie was listening to what was popular, which would have been Madonna and Prince were kind of and Michael Jackson were at the top of pop stardom at that point. Although I don't think Prince was ever as popular if it comes to album sales as Madonna and Michael Jackson. And he looked at that, and he should have taken elements, right? And instead he just kind of took all of it greedily and went, well, if pepper's good, I'm going to use black pepper and cayenne pepper and some pepper sauce. We're going to throw some Tabasco in there. And it becomes this thing that doesn't know what it is because he doesn't have one flavor. As for what type of Bowie fan I was when I first heard that album, so once I started listening to David Bowie, my wife had some Bowie CDs. Her oldest Bowie CD was Hunky Dory. So I actually started listening to Bowie in more or less chronological order. And then whenever I hit a gap, I would go buy that CD. So while I didn't experience them in real time, I did listen to them in order. And now Let's Dance is very nostalgic music for me because it was on MTV in the 80s all the time. And all my friends loved that. It wasn't really my music. I was, as I said earlier, I was super into Dio. But I remember those songs. I remember Modern Love and I remember Let's Dance. Not as much China Girl. I always thought that was a pretty strange song. But there's a lot of nostalgia there. Blue Jean, I just remember it had that weird 15-minute video where he's a spy in Morocco.
Jeez.
The last 3 minutes is him doing the song, and it's 12 minutes of silent film.
That's overindulgence, wasn't it? It's just over the top. The days of the mini movie on MTV.
Yes. Thank you, Michael Jackson, for starting that trend with Thriller.
Oh, absolutely.
But then
I call that the doppelganger video, isn't it? Where you've got David Bowie following somebody who is David Bowie. It's the doppelganger.
Right. If you're curious, I'm sure it's on MTV. Anybody who hasn't watched it, I wouldn't suggest tracking it down. It is just a historical curiosity. It's not very entertaining. But by the time I got to, so Let's Dance, I was like, hey, happy, nostalgia. And I love Stevie Ray Vaughan, which in the versions that I was used to on MTV, Stevie Ray is two notes.
Yeah.
In Let's Dance, the radio edit, Stevie Ray Vaughan is doo-doo. And doesn't
that solo of his just cut through?
Yes. If you listen to the album, yes.
It's just brilliant.
But by the time you get to clearly after Let's Dance, Tonight was a big letdown. I was like, oh,
Huge.
he doesn't have the songs here. And then Never Let Me Down just felt a little desperate, like he was just shoveling everything he could. This is me shoveling, in case you don't get the pantomime. He was just shoveling everything he could to make that work, and I don't think it stuck. But at the same time, I don't think that audiences would have been receptive to a stripped back version of it either. I
Yeah.
think the time was wrong on that.
Yeah. I look, I like the album. I like the production, and I've heard the stripped back versions, and it's quite stark. It is naked, and you know, I think that. I mean, do we agree that the songs are there?
Yes.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
basic songs. Because,
I love the
like,
song.
if we look at pound for pound, there's some great songs on here, and it's really funny when you look at. I've done a lot of research on the net about this album. Everyone disrespects the album, but they always say, "Oh, there's one underrated song," and every single website has picked a different underrated song. So
Right.
everyone that disses this album says, "Oh, the album, it's not very good, except Time Will Crawl's a classic." And then somebody will say, "Beat of Your Drum." So everyone has a favorite. They pick a particular song. So collectively, there's a lot of underrated songs on this album. So the structure's there. So maybe it comes down to where we have our point of differences. The songs are there, some intelligent lyrics. And by the way, he's singing, his vocals are sensational on this album. I don't think I've
They
heard him
really are.
sing better in the 80s. He was really, vocally, he was really on point. Would you agree, Reed, on this one?
Yes, which makes it more of a tragedy that in so many of those songs he has mixed himself back behind his backup, or at least equal volume with his backup singers, because
Mm,
he really uh, should have had that mixed more up front.
yeah. So I think it comes down to production. So that's probably where we disagree. Do you think, like, music is cyclic, isn't it? So we all goes in phases, and strip back music. If you had a crystal ball, do you think this sort of bigger than life production will ever be looked at more kindly in the future? Do you think it might take a rap artist or someone in the hip hop world to sample this album, and it gets revisited, and potentially there's some scope to think, okay, this album's not so bad, and look more favorably at the production?
I mean, maybe. So I don't have a good sense of where pop music is now.
Either do I.
Um,
So
I every time I try to listen to, there are some YouTube videos that I watch, probably the same thing that anybody on this channel watches.
mm,
There's a man that I like named Rick Beato. He has a lot of followers on YouTube and Instagram, and he'll do like the top 10 on Spotify. And he'll play a few minutes of it. And typically out of the top 10, there'll be two songs that I go, oh, that's kind of interesting. And the other 8 songs are functionally interchangeable.
mm,
And it seems that music is not in a very diverse place right now. However, I would hope that the cure to that isn't, to add to the production tricks of it. It's to just write better songs. I
mm.
will say I'll take Never Let Me Down over Tonight any day.
Yeah, I think that Tonight had two strong songs. Like, bar the video clip, Blue Jeans is a decent song. I think the big
Yes.
one that has got a lot of that has aged well and has had a lot of critical appraisal, that it's a really genius Bowie song, is Loving the Alien.
Yep.
But,
Those are the
but
two I would have picked.
yeah, but the rest of it is quite throwaway. Like God Only Knows, awful. The duet with Tina Turner, the reggae one, the name escapes me, is pretty. There's just a lot of filler,
Right.
and a lot of cover versions. So I think even Bowie said that himself. He said that there are individual songs, if you played it on the radio, they hold up well. But as an album, he even said it was far short. But I still think that this album, Never Let Me Down, is you know, when you're rating it, they rate it right near the bottom. And I'm sorry, I will defend it. And maybe I was rose-colored glasses and I was there and I saw the show and caught up with it. I think I would rate this much higher. If look, is it Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders of Mars? Brilliant. Aladdin Sane? No, but it's not at the bottom. And I would definitely rate something like Tonight much lower. I don't think any of his earlier ones where he was on the Pie label, and I'm talking before the, you know, when he was trying to find his sound, would be better than this album from a songwriting. But I think that, you know, there's some really good songs on this album that as songs, they hold up. And yeah, look, the one that probably has got a lot of, is the one that everyone seems to like is Time Will Crawl. And it's just in my head.
I was fascinated too. When I read the review on Rolling Stone, my favorite song on that album is Zeros.
Yeah.
And Rolling Stone actually called that out as being the best song on the album. And I thought, wait, did I agree with Rolling Stone on something? That's unusual.
Yeah. Did they, how many stars did they give it? Two,
They
one?
actually, I could not find a rating.
Yeah.
All Music gives it 2 out of 5.
Yeah. So
that original version, I'm probably only going to give it about a 5 or 6.
6 out of 10.
Yeah, it's not anywhere near my top, but it's not near my bottom either. I know some people got very offended apparently by me saying that Low wasn't really worthy of being one of Bowie's greatest albums.
Yeah.
And I still say any Bowie album that's half instrumental that's not why I buy Bowie albums.
Yeah.
I wanted to listen to Brian Eno, I buy Brian Eno.
Yep.
Yep. So, and the other half of it, the vocal half of Low is no better than Station to Station. It's got songs like Be My Wife and Fantastic Voyage. But I mean, they're good songs. I enjoy the album. I just don't think it's one of his greatest. And I don't think it's the creative rebirth that people say it is.
Yep. Yep.
And now I'm not even sure why I'm getting into this. Oh yeah, because I'm sorry, I'm rating Never Let Me Down.
No, look, I think that's fine, because when you're talking about David Bowie, you go on there's rabbit holes everywhere. Look, I'm an Uber fan, so are you. But for some damn reason, this album is, I defend it, and I really love it. And, as I said, I saw the show, and, it was 18, 19. It was one of those early rock shows, and it really impressed me, the theatrical. But I also saw him when he came out to Australia and did his final world tour, and it was just basically him stripped back with the band. I appreciate he was doing, not just focusing on the 80s, but the whole greatest hits, and how wonderful that was. So I've seen both sides of the coin, the theatrical, the 80s, the MTV, but I've also seen the stripped back, his later years, doing a retrospective from start to finish. And, what a great artist he was. So look, with rose-colored glasses, Reed, I probably would give it an 8 or an 8.5, but maybe guilty as charged. It's one of those ones that,
I would
pretty hard to defend.
That's a contrarian opinion. Not an indefensible opinion, but definitely a contrarian.
Yeah, but you never know. This will be on YouTube, and maybe in 20 years' time, okay. We've rediscovered the wall of sound, the 80s production, drum machines.
Rolling Stone, that guy was insulting Diamond Dogs, and I said Diamond Dogs is my favorite Bowie album, well, one of 3.
Yeah.
So, it's all good. It would be a boring world if we all liked exactly the same
Absolutely.
thing.
I gave up on reading Rolling Stone albums because, any album I liked and they gave it a 2 and a 1 star, you sort of think, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Reed. Tell me what you guys think. Put your comments, thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this a contrarian thought? that this album is, should be maligned as it was at the time, and to a certain extent it still is, or is it a misunderstood classic? Put your comments in, and I'd like to see. And thank you for your time, Reed. This has been a really good chat.
Peter, I've enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me. And everyone,
Absolutely.
This is a big experiment. This is the first chat without either Marco or Martin. So let us know what you think.
No problem. See you later. Bye.
Bye.